Open your eyes.
Breath of the Wild is a departure from the traditional Zelda game. Much like Wind Waker and Majora's Mask were outliers. The trailers for this game looked incredible, with many realizing that this could be the first open-world Zelda game. Honestly, I was a bit skeptical as to how the game would turn out, as I wasn't sure how Zelda would work as an open-world experience. At the same time though, I was also very excited. Wind Waker was the closest Zelda had ever come to going open world, at a time where no one knew what the term open world even meant. So a return to this kind of innovation was a very much welcome change. Needless to say, this was a day one buy for me on the Wii U. And I'm happy to report I loved the game so much that I also purchased it for the Switch when I eventually got around to purchasing one. However, how does Breath of the Wild succeed in delivering an amazing open world experience when so many other games at the time were trying to do the same but fell flat on their face? Today, we're going to be taking a look at how The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild does open world right, where so many other games utterly fail.
Wake up, Link.
The game begins as Link awakens in a cave, in which he's called to by a voice. He gets up, grabs some clothes so he's not running around naked, and exits the cave. The game pans out to show the vast open world you have to explore. Immediately, this sets the tone for the rest of the game. There are no prologues or preludes before the game sets you free. One small cutscene, and that's it. Well, okay, that's a bit of a lie. There is a sort of tutorial in the beginning with an old man kind of guiding you, but the game does the tutorial so well that you don't even know you're playing one. This is in stark contrast to any other open world game, where there's a big old screen in front of you with tutorial flashing in blue, red, and neon lights. No, none of that. Get that out of my open world game. Now, to complete the tutorial, there are 4 shrines that Link must travel to, solve the puzzles within those shrines, and gain 4 abilities that you will use constantly throughout your journey. Those 4 abilities are Magnesis, Stasis, Cryonis, and Remote Trigger Bombs. We'll get to how much freedom these abilities allow for later. The Great Plateau is the first area you start out in, where all 4 of these shrines are located. In this area, you must learn how to experiment with cooking to make effective meals, gather ingredients to make said meals, how to make campfires to quickly pass the time, and most important of all, learning to deal with weather conditions. You are actually given a decision to make as to how you want to deal with those weather conditions. You can either use hot peppers to cook a meal that can provide you cold resistance, or you can do a favor for the old man and cook a specific dish that you must give to him in exchange for clothing that provides you with cold protection. If you're adventurous enough, you could literally carry a torch the entire way to the shrine instead, completely ignoring both options I just mentioned. This is one of the first examples of how Breath of the Wild lets you play the game how you want to play it. I discovered this fact on my second playthrough of the game, which is awesome because it's honestly very hard to see all that this game has to offer on one single playthrough. All of this in the first area of the game. The game doesn't explicitly tell you any of what I mentioned. You learn all of it through playing the game and experimenting and exploring the world. a concept very much foreign to most game developers nowadays. After venturing through the 4 shrines and obtaining all 4 abilities, the King of Hyrule then gives you a Paraglider and tells you to go to Kakariko Village to see the village Sheikah for guidance. He warns you about going straight to Hyrule Castle, which is the final area, as you're still very weak. Funnily enough, this is really just a warning. In most games, this means quite literally, you cannot go here yet. Well, guess what? You can go straight to the final boss after finishing the tutorial. The game is constantly giving the player choices and the freedom to actually choose and have consequences based on your decision is what allows the player to feel such a great sense of freedom. If you're skilled enough, you can make it to the final area, grab some endgame equipment, and leave if you like. You'd think this would make the game an unbalanced experience, right? Wrong. The weapon breaking system, as much as people hate it, is a big reason why this game allows for so much freedom. You can only use those endgame weapons for so long before they break, and you can only carry so much of them at the beginning due to not having much inventory space. Yes, inventory space in a Zelda game, who would have thought? This leaves you free to enjoy the other areas of the game without ruining your playthrough, so to speak. So let's get back to those 4 mechanics that I mentioned: Stasis, Magnesis, Cryonis, and the remote trigger bombs. And let's talk about each ability one at a time and break down how well they complement the puzzles and world in general. First, the Stasis ability. Man, this ability was cool. Freezing an object, hitting it a couple times to power up how far you want the object to go in a certain direction, and then releasing the ability. At first, the ability seemed so simple, but this mechanic allowed them to add so much variety into the game. Stasis could be used in combat to freeze objects being thrown at you. You can stasis big boxes and send them smashing into your enemies. There's even a golf minigame in one of the shrines that involves stasis. And that's just a few examples of all that you could do with that one ability alone. Moving on to Magnesis, the same variety allowed for with Stasis also applies here. You can grab metal objects and move them around as you please, creating bridges if need be, or smacking enemies, or bringing treasure chests out of reach closer to you. And these are just a few examples of what Magnesis allows for. Next, we all know about the classic Zelda item, the bombs. But this time they put a spin on things, and the bombs come in 2 forms: a spherical shape and cube shape, which both can be remotely detonated. The spherical bomb is affected by force and physics in general, while the cube bomb is not. You want to use the right type of bomb depending on the situation. I loved the bombs in this game, as making them remotely detonated allowed for complex puzzles that wouldn't have worked with a time-based bomb, like most Zelda games. For instance, there's one puzzle where you have to use both types of bombs to flip a switch remotely twice, detonate one type to flip the switch once, and then the other type once more to actually open the gate to the shrine. Then, there's Cryonis. I mostly use this to avoid having to swim, as swimming can be such a slow way to get around in the water. There's also a few neat puzzles involving Cryonis, but I don't have as much to say about this ability than the others. Finally, there's the camera, the best of all the abilities. I mean, you can take selfies in this game, it's obviously a 10 out of 10, come on. In all seriousness, the Hyrule Compendium is a great addition to this game, allowing you to search for an item you've seen once before, easily once you've taken a picture of that item. As vast as this world is, this feature was most definitely a welcome addition. Now, let's talk about the act of traveling in this game. There are so many different methods to actually get around in this world, and all of them very important due to how vast the game's world really is. As I mentioned before, once the Paraglider is obtained, the world really is your oyster. Paragliding is the most effective way to get around by far, but you need enough height to paraglide a fair distance. So, in cases where you don't have enough height, you can shield slide down terrain, which is faster than sprinting. You can climb up literally anything outside of shrines. If there's a mountain that you want to get higher ground, then paraglide to your newly decided destination. In a grassy area, set the grass on fire to create an updraft, which you can then ride up using your paraglider to get around as well. You can even use a spicy pepper to create an updraft, which I just learned while making this video. There are also abilities that can be obtained that help make exploration efforts easier after completing certain sacred beasts, which are essentially the 4 Zelda dungeons of this game. Don't forget horse riding, which is another great way to get around. Personally though, I found the horse riding quite irritating, as wild horses won't listen to you for quite some time until you earn their affection, so usually I traveled on foot. Wasn't really a fan of that system, to be honest, but I can see why it was put in. A very small gripe when there are a multitude of options available to you. When traveling, the game does a great job of helping to guide you, as this is a really big world and can be very easy to get lost in. The first thing you usually want to do when in a new area is find the overarching tower that can be seen from almost anywhere. Each section of the map in Breath of the Wild has one of these towers. Upon climbing it, Link unlocks that portion of the map. These are similar to Assassin's Creed's viewpoints, but are executed much better. In Assassin's Creed, viewpoints unlock waypoints that show where side quests, treasure chests, stores and the like are to the player. All the player has to do at that point is set a waypoint on the map to those events and watch as the distance meter goes down to 0 the closer they get. The way these viewpoints work make things feel much more like a checklist or a chore rather than playing a video game. In Breath of the Wild, all these towers unlock is the shape of the terrain and that portion of the map, but everything else is still hidden. There are no points of interest, no waypoints to show you where enemy camps are, nothing. So then, what's the point of even going to the towers? It's so that you, the player, can survey the map yourself instead of the game automatically doing that for you. You're the one that uses your Sheikah slate to look around the map and pin points of interest, whether that be shrines, a treasure chest, or an enemy camp. Not only that, but each tower feels like an accomplishment to successfully climb, as each tower usually has a unique obstacle that you must overcome before being able to reach the top. The same is not true for any of the towers in Assassin's Creed, or any other open world game by extension. There are also lots of different treasures hidden around the world for you to find. It's very satisfying to find hidden chests within shrines and in lakes to hurriedly open to see what's inside. However, usually what's inside is pretty disappointing. Mostly, you'll be finding equipment or arrows, which is in the beginning useful, only up until it breaks though. The weapon breaking system's biggest strength is also its biggest weakness. The game does have a sense of balance thanks to this system, but at the same time, finding equipment can be rather disappointing since you know it's going to break soon after finding the equipment anyway. At least when you obtain armor, you know that won't ever disappear. I think part of the reason that the treasure is so lacking is also due to how much freedom is allowed in the game. Think about it, if they were to make key items that actually served a function in the world, then you would need to get that item before traveling to a certain area that may need that key item. Which is why after completing dungeons, they only give you abilities that aid exploration or combat. I think this trade-off was made for the better, as I really do like the sense of freedom that this game provides. Now, this Zelda game is definitely the most difficult of all its predecessors, as enemies don't just take a teensy-weensy bit of your heart when Link gets hit. No, these enemies absolutely smack you around. You can easily get one shot in an area that you were unprepared for, And that just serves to make the adventuring through the world more satisfying once you finally overcome an obstacle that's been constantly killing you, especially if you're undergeared. One of the best examples of this for me personally was when you first encounter the Lionel on the top of the mountain. This is obviously a fight you're supposed to come back to later, especially if this is the Zora Sacred Beast that you chose to tackle, as again, the dungeons can be done out of order. But I'm not one to shy away from a challenge. I ran at him again, and again, and again, and he'd kill me over and over and over. But then you have that one run where it's just like, when I finally defeated him, I was ecstatic. Not only did I defeat him, but as a reward, he dropped his shield, sword, and bow that fired 3 arrows at once. Running around with his equipment on my back gave me a feeling very similar to Monster Hunter, which is a very good feeling to have, especially in a game like Zelda. There are still tons of things I could continue to talk about in this game. There's the freedom being reflected in your choice to either extend your stamina gauge or increase your hearts. There's the clever way the developers put in a way to defeat guardians at the very start of the game when they're supposed to be an endgame enemy, and so many other things that make Breath of the Wild the best open world game I've ever played and sets a new standard that all other open world games need to meet. Do you guys agree? What do you think is your favorite Zelda of the series? Let me know in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe for more game analysis and discussion. As always, I will see you all in the next video.